and you'll come up on my YouTube channel within a day or so. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. I am grateful, we are grateful for the opportunity to draw closer to one another, to the Jewish tradition, to Torah, and ultimately to the divine source, which provides us with inspiration and wisdom through immersing ourselves in words of Torah. That's a bit of a free translation of the bracha that we just said. Um, so here we are, midway through the first week of Pesach. Therefore, it is the Omer, the 7-week stretch between Pesach and Shavuot, which will be June 4th in the evening, the 5th, and if you observe 2 days, the 6th of June as well. During this time of ancient barley harvesting, Israelites would come up to the temple, each presenting sheaves of barley, known in Hebrew as omer. Omer is a word for a sheaf, referring to the barley harvest, which is the first major grain to ripen in springtime. And through these daily offerings, they would not only express gratitude and propitiate God to continue on the path of fertility for their agricultural yield, but they would also create a kind of spiritual bridge from the Feast of Liberation to the Feast of Revelation, which is Shavuot. Shavuot is the time that is associated on the Jewish calendar not only with the early spring harvest, but also with the receiving of Torah at Sinai. So you have an agricultural and a narrative or biblical story overlay, as most of the holidays do. Certainly all of the pilgrimage festivals have an agricultural dimension as well as a spiritual dimension. The Omer is therefore also associated with deep study of Torah. So as we chart our 7-week course from Pesach to Shavuot, and some of us are participating in a custom called Sfirat HaOmer, which means counting the Omer, reciting aloud a bracha, a blessing, and the numerical designation of each sequential day of this 7-week period called Omer every evening at sundown. We are also recommitting ourselves to be ready for receiving Torah anew on Erev and the day of Shavuot. So my goal here is to renew our study, renew our commitment to Torah, and so just remind your buddies that class is back on, and I'll do my best to make sure the temple is sending out its reminders. So we're on between now and Memorial Day. I'm going to be away on the 26th of May. So we're not having class that day. It happens to be one, my sister's birthday. Two, Kelly and I are celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary that day. And three, I'll be in Salt Lake City, where Kelly has recently traveled to begin rehearsing for performances of Hello Dolly. So that was just a few weeks ago. She auditioned and was offered a wonderful opportunity to come back on stage for live theater. It'll be the first time in 3 years for her. So that's really like most live theater actors. It's been a very challenging period professionally, but she's thrilled to be asked to play the role of Irene Malloy, who's like the other leading lady in Hello Dolly. Okay, so there's my personal update. We are going to be looking exactly at where we left off in Pirkei Avot chapter 4. So let me just take a moment to bring up the tab, bring up the screen, and talk about and pick up exactly where we left off. And I'll actually recap one text, the Mishnah, Pirkei Avot chapter 4, Mishnah number 14, and then we'll go right into 15. And all of these classes, by the way, if you need a refresher, are up on my YouTube channel, so you can watch and get refreshed. So the one we looked at was Rabbi Nihorai, who said, "Go as an exile." I'm not sure why it says voluntary, but I guess in Jewish history we've been involuntary exiles so many times that the clarification felt warranted by the translator here, but it's not in the text. Or exile yourself. Heve goleh, be an exile in a place of Torah. And say not that it will come after you, meaning don't go there thinking that Torah will find you, but rather it is your fellow students who will make it permanent in your hand and lean not upon your own understanding. We spent quite some time unpacking this last time, so I don't want to go into a long excursus here. You can follow the conversation on, again, on the recorded YouTube channel. But we talked about how in Judaism, Torah is not intended to be a project undertaken in a solitary fashion. And yet at the same time, the pursuit of Torah needs to be something that is protected, right? You need to set aside the time and the space, physical or mental, to devote yourself to your study. Now, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. Obviously, you're spending a Thursday morning with your rabbi and with your fellow WRT Mishnah mavens to do exactly this. So you don't need to be persuaded. Though I'll say that I've had the opportunity, coming back to this particular text is really powerful and poignant. Just again, a little personal reflection. Before I went back and watched myself on the YouTube, and I observed that I interpreted this reading as my pre-sabbatical charge, that it was a reminder why I was taking sabbatical in the first place and what I intended to do during my sabbatical leave this winter. And I come back here today rereading this text saying how special it has been to have had January, February, and March for many different activities were undertaken during my sabbatical, many of which I was blessed not to have to be in direct contact with WRT. There have probably been a few things that also required me to be in contact with WRT more than I expected during the winter. But I chiefly dedicated myself to intensive study. So I've now completed 2 semesters of conversational Hebrew in an online ulpan out of Tel Aviv. My class this time featured students from Buenos Aires, Belgium, Amsterdam, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, New York, White Plains, Seattle, and Toronto. We had a fantastic group, and our teacher based in Tel Aviv. This program, if you're ever interested in advancing your own conversational Hebrew, whatever level you may be at, they go all the way up from beginners to advanced. There are 8 or 9 levels. And it was really outstanding. I feel like my spoken Hebrew is in a better place than it ever has been. Um, and that was several classes a week, 2 hours each, plus about 10 to 15 hours of homework a week. So that was a substantial undertaking. I also continued to immerse myself in Hasidic literature in the original Hebrew, which was really wonderful. I have a weekly Talmud study with Rabbi Jan Katsu of the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, formerly a member of WRT and the head of education for the Union for Reform Judaism. And I studied at the Hadar Rabbinic Yeshiva Intensive in Manhattan for 4 days of nothing but Talmud study. And I am participating in a regular cohort of learners sponsored by the Hartman Institute around contemporary dilemmas facing Israel and Palestine. So I've really gotten to go deep in my studies, and I'm really excited to share some of that learning with the congregation. But I will say that, any Jewish learning contributes meaningfully to one's understanding of the whole, of the totality. So studying conversational Hebrew has a direct beneficial application on my understanding of Pirkei Avot, and vice versa. I was the only observant Jewish person in this ulpan. The guy from Toronto is fairly observant too, but I was the guy who kept saying, "Oh, this modern word in Hebrew, I just saw it a few weeks ago in Mishnah, and here's what it means in the Mishnah, and here's how it's being used in the 21st century." So this whole precept that Rabbi Nehorai shares with us, that you have to kind of exile yourself. Again, I'm not seeing exile as a negative here. I'm seeing it more as a, sequester, cloister, set yourself aside and set the time and space aside for your Torah. And don't assume that Torah will come to you. Um, And then I love this. It is your fellow students who will make it permanent in your hand, that you don't do it alone. And so, in all of these instances, having study cohort, having a chavruta, having a class to be with, has been just exceptionally meaningful for me. So I want to thank you as my community congregants, my congregation, for investing in the ability of your rabbi to have this time to deepen his learning. I believe that it is, I want you to know that it's beneficial to me, but I also affirm how beneficial I believe it will be for WRT. So, okay, here we go. The next text. Rabbi Yannai Omer. So if you're a little bit rusty, let's start easy. Rabbi Yannai says, or said, Rabbi Yannai Omer, Ein biadenu lo mishalvat harishaim ve'af lo misurei hatzadikim. So we're diving way into the deep end of Jewish wisdom here. The words are not that hard, but the concept is going to take a lot of our time and mental energy. So Rabbi Yannai says, Ein biyadenu. A yad is, of course, a hand, and the enu suffix is the plural first person possessive. So our hands. Ein biyadenu, the negative. Ein is a form of it is not. So ein biyadenu, it is not in our hands, or is not within our power. Biyad or biyadenu doesn't just mean a physical hand, right? The rabbis have a sophisticated appreciation for metaphor. Ein biyadenu, it is not in our hands. Lo mishalvat harishaim. Lo in this case means not, but it means neither. The tranquility of the wicked, Rishayim, Rasha. You may have encountered the word Rasha last weekend at your Pesach Seder. The Rasha is the wicked child, or the child who is who challenges the meaning of the Pesach. What does this mean to you, says the Rasha? And by excluding himself, he forfeits his share. If you were reading a traditional Haggadah, you learned about the wicked child. So, Ein biadenu lo mishalvat harishaim. It is not in our hands, and they put here in brackets what is implied to explain the reason. But just go with the Hebrew. Ein biadenu. It is not in our hands, neither the tranquility of the wicked. Here they say security, but I don't like security. There are other words that mean security. Shalva, or in this case, shalvat, in the construct form, means tranquility, ease, being content, being just relaxed and chill. Harishayim, of the wicked. Ve'af, in this case I would say, and also, lo misurei hatzadikim. Nor, so if it's I think it's a neither nor construction here. Neither the tranquility of the wicked, nor the chastisements of the righteous. Yisurin, or in this case, yisurei, in the construct form, means chastisements, punishments, or just, it's the general rabbinic word that implies suffering. There are, again, other Hebrew words that mean suffering, but usually yisurin or yisurei implies suffering. So let's just stop here. Again, I'll say the sentence as I would translate it one more time. Neither the tranquility of the wicked nor the suffering of the righteous is in our hands. Now that's a very important assertion. Okay, Dad, you might have a comment here.
The misurim sounds like tsuris. Troubles?
False cognate.
Oh,
So
okay.
tsuris is direct through Yiddish or Ashkenazi pronunciation of the Hebrew word tsarot with a tzadi. This is yisurin with a samech. So it's not, it only sounds that way because it sounds that way. But the actual derivation of tsuris, which by the way, I played for 93 points in Scrabble recently, and it's a real legit word. So I got tsuris on a triple word. Actually, my opponent got tsuris. I was victorious. So tsuris is from sarot. Other thoughts on what the Rabbi Yannai wants to convey here by saying neither the tranquility of the wicked, nor the suffering of the righteous is in our hands. Do you believe it? Does it resonate with you? What do you think his project is here, Alan?
It's more of a question because the adjectives of those two types of people you would think is reversed. The wicked you would want to suffer,
Right.
and the righteous you would want to be tranquil. So I don't understand. Something's behind this that I can't wait to find out from you. What
Okay,
it's really all
well,
about.
yeah, we'll unpack that. Great, but thank you. What you've basically done for us is affirm that we feel cognitive dissonance around these concepts. I'm going to ask for Steve Maskett to speak next.
Yeah, it sounds like the rabbis are just struggling with why bad things happen to good people.
Yeah, I mean, this is so in academic circles, or people who study theology for a living, it's very interesting that thus far in the text, God is nowhere mentioned in this text, right? We're starting with the human condition. And it seems, I believe Rabbi Yannai observes correctly a feature of what it means to be a person in the world, which is that sometimes, maybe all the time, bad people prosper, or at least seem untroubled, and are living in a way that is untroubled, and good people suffer. In a theological context, I mean, in a context of just, well, dems de breaks, that's life, there's no problem here. There's only a problem if you also affirm the reality of a good and omnipotent God, because that throws a huge monkey wrench into the gears, right? How can we square what Yannai is observing, that good people suffer, bad people prosper, or at least remain untroubled in this world? This problem in academic circles is called theodicy. Not the book by Homer, not the Odyssey. Theodicy, one word from the Greek. Theodicy. Theodicy comes from a root meaning, or two roots, theos, which is God, and disos, or dise, which means justice. God's justice. In other words, if we affirm the reality of God, and we don't, for instance, tolerate the idea that, well, maybe there's an equally powerful demigod who is responsible for all the evil in the world, which, by the way, is part of ancient Near Eastern thought among the Gnostics, including the Zoroastrians. One of my closest friends in the world happens to be a Zoroastrian, my buddy Darius Lakdawala, Persian Zoroastrian, born in Sri Lanka, raised in London and LA. Went to college, he was one of my college roommates. Darius is a Zoroastrian. In the Zoroastrian ancient Persian belief set, there's a god of light and good, and there's a god of darkness and evil. And they're always in contention with each other. And they are responsible for the duality of competing forces in the world and the dual tensions that tug at a human being, good and bad, light and dark. That is not Jewish monotheism. Jewish monotheism is a radical assertion that everything comes from God, and even more radical in the Kabbalah and the Hasidic literature that I've been studying, that everything is God. Everything is a manifestation of God's all-encompassing reality. Therefore, if one affirms the reality of God, if one's belief system promotes the idea that God is the paradigm or the paragon of mercy, justice, patience, all the good things, well, what the heck, God? Because there's a tzaddik over there who is destitute, ill, and abused and maligned, and over on my other side, I've got, a corrupt, wealthy criminal who's living it up. So what's the deal? So this is a theological problem, even though nowhere in the text yet has God's name been mentioned. Mara Steiner.
I think what I'm going to say is similar to Alan, but by what it says here in the Mishnah, that this is not happening, does that imply the opposite does happen?
Yeah, exactly. What it is saying is not, the not is ein biadenu. Literally, it is not in our hands. And it's very interesting that the context here starts with the experience of humanity, right? This is what it means to be a person. You're going to grow up, and remember, this is a training manual by rabbis for rabbis. So I would have found, I'm sure I encountered this in rabbinical school, I think this is really important wisdom for dealing with the congregational rabbinate. I can imagine an adolescent boy hearing for the first time, let me shatter your illusions about how the world really works, boy chick. You are going to meet people who are the most inspired, righteous souls you'll ever meet, and yet they undergo inordinate suffering. You will also meet in life, you will encounter people who are abjectly wicked and who seem untroubled and who have all access to all of the luxury life can offer. I'm looking at you, Vladimir Putin. Right? So, Steve Maskett, did you want to follow up? I heard you pipe in, but I had already moved on.
No, I think it's not in our hands. I mean, the question is it other people's hands, or is it outside of that? So.
We're going to come back to the text and explore just that. Like, so if it's not in our hands, then what? Like, in other words, we have no control over it. The expression biyad or biyadenu is a euphemistic way of talking about power and control, and what a human being has the ability to control in his or her life. Michelle Braun.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Ed, you want to go first, and then I'll get you, Michelle.
No, I'm trying to. What I struggle with a lot, and it comes up again in your, what you've just been discussing, is the inherent inability of human beings to express, to explain or rationalize what is the results you just spoke of, the dichotomy between good people experiencing bad things and vice versa.
Yeah.
But to attribute that in human terms, I find is nearly impossible if you accept as a premise that God is eternal, God is all-knowing, all-powerful.
Right, and I'm going to go one step further and just observe with you, Ed. This is a text that kind of demands that we just sit with it. Because what makes this text fascinating to me especially is what is not said. Yannai does not try to over-explain this. It is simply a declarative statement. It is not in our hands. We lack the ability. And it doesn't say to explain. It just says, again, I invert the syntax so that we don't have to deal with the bracketed comment here that the translator provides. So my translation for the phrase is, neither the tranquility of the wicked nor the suffering of the righteous is in our hands.
Right.
Period. And that can mean both the fact of it and the ability to understand it or explain it. It is the rare rabbinic admission of just throwing up one's hands and going. It's a remarkably humble statement.
Right.
Just to say, we rabbis, who, by the way, are tasked with explaining everything about how the universe works and what our responsibility to the world and God and each other is, well, this one is beyond us, right? So sit with the discomfort, because I think that's exactly what Rabbi Yannai is asking us to do. It's a declarative statement. Hey, not only do we recognize this about the world, it's out of our control.
Right.
It does beg one unasked and possibly answered question, though, which is, so now what? And I've gone back through a lot of my writing, a lot of my sermons. Very few of my ideas are original ideas. I'm a voracious reader and student of all manner of learning. And so what I'm good at is synthesizing ideas from disparate sources and making them exist in dialogue, getting them to talk to one another, and then sharing the dialogue with you, and we contribute to it. That's what I do. But my ideas, so to speak, aren't so original. In other words, other smarter people said them first and better. But this one here, for instance, it is not in our hands. Sorry, neither the tranquility of the righteous of the wicked nor the suffering of the righteous is in our hands. The sentence I want to ask, or the question I want to ask next is, so now what? That was, I think, most powerfully articulated by Viktor Frankl, who is also credited with the 614th commandment, thou shalt not grant Hitler a posthumous victory. He was the Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist, philosopher, writer, Holocaust survivor, who wrote his landmark work, Man's Search for Meaning, which was a story of how he survived the Shoah by finding personal meaning in the experience, which gave him the will to live through it. This is considered a landmark work of psychology and just thought. And so he talks a lot about the meaning of suffering. And effectively, it is Frankl's premise that we assign meaning to the experiences that life gives us, and that we, even when the Nazis took everything from us, the one thing they could not take was how we would choose to respond to what they were doing. We could either become nihilists and say, well, this is definitive proof that there is no God, that all life is suffering. Rabbi Yannai, full stop. They watch the SS guards who seem untroubled. They watch their fellow incarcerated Jews who are being murdered by the millions, and they say, everything is meaningless. I renounce God, I renounce my faith, I renounce my humanity. It would be better off if I were dead. But not every Shoah victim responded that way. Many, of course, were not given the choice to respond. But of the survivors, many chose to affirm, my life has worth, my life has meaning, and I'm going to live now in such a way as to imbue my deeds with worth. That's the Frankelian way of looking at the Shoah and looking at life. That's the so now what? Now that life has given you this awful thing, now what do you do? That still is, in the language of the rabbis, biyadenu. That is still within our hands, even in trauma. Now, obviously, there are degrees of physical and mental trauma and incapacitation that diminish one's ability to, there are always certain limitations on how we might respond. But Frankl's great contribution to psychology is this idea that meaning is not inherent, it is assigned, it is created. It is actually, again, not original to Frankl. That's the heart of existential thought as well. Right? I think, therefore I am. We assign the meaning to our deeds. They don't have inherent meaning. And so the reason I started with a reflection about how I think and how I operate as a teacher and as a rabbi, I go back through my sermons. This is a theme I keep returning to. Because, in the 22 years I've been serving as a rabbi, I have seen Rabbi Yannai's statement proved time and time again, both for good and for bad, by the way. But particularly, I have been thrust into situations where I can only look dumbfounded upon the suffering of good people. That is, I think that if you're paying attention, that's just life. Like if you're turning on the news today and you have even a shred of empathy, Rabbi Yannai's statement is proving itself every minute of the day if you're paying attention. But when you are tasked as the rabbi to help memorialize an entire family that perishes in a plane crash, like the best family, the warmest, kindest, most philanthropic, like I could go on and on and on. All I can do is what Rabbi Yannai does, is say, yeah, that's life. Or there is no upper limit to the monumental indifference of the world vis-a-vis human beings. Or put another, these are all phrases I've used over the years. Or put another way, the universe is not calibrated to human notions of fairness. That is an original wording of mine. I would not say the idea is original, though, because Rabbi Yannai said the same thing. The universe is not calibrated to human notions of fairness. That's another line I've used many times in sermons. All of these things are true, but they don't get to the Jewish project, which is the next sentence. So now what? Now that I affirm this awful reality about the world, now what do I do? You're really at a moral you're at a moral crossroads, because you still have the choice to affirm that my life has worth, my life has meaning, I am made in the divine image, the world needs me, the world needs tikkun, the olam needs tikkun, I need to repair what is broken about this world, and that will imbue my deeds and my days with worth. Or the other path, which is, I'm going to pursue every pleasure in a hedonistic, gluttonous way. I'm going to become a complete nihilist. I'm going to cause mayhem and harm to myself and others because it doesn't matter. There are all sorts of alternatives. It's the Viktor Frankl presupposition that the one thing even Hitler couldn't take away was our freedom of how we would respond to the trauma that had been inflicted on us. Now that's all just from one line of Pirkei Avot. That's what it calls up for me. Any other thoughts that one line calls up for you, perhaps?
So I was just wondering whether another aspect to that would be sort of it's not in our hands being, as rabbis, it's not in our hands. And if the mitzvah system is there for people to do what they're supposed to do, blah, 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 and they can save themselves somehow.
I like that layer, Steve. Yeah, thank
but
you for remembering what I said a few minutes ago, which is that this is a book by rabbis for rabbis. So it's also a way of kind of taking rabbis down a notch, because rabbis tend to, and it's not our fault entirely, but we sometimes have an inflated sense of our own authority in the world. Again, the Jewish community imputes certain authority to me. I can't tell you how many times when I tell somebody that I'm going to say a prayer for them, they respond, "Thank you so much. You have a direct line." Like, no, well, yes, and so do you. I don't have any more access to the divine than you do. As I say, another one of those things I keep coming back to in my sermons are the limitations on rabbinic authority. We are qualified to teach and to adjudicate matters of Jewish law and practice. That's the end of it. The community imputes levels of holiness and proximity to God that may be true, but they are not more true for me than they are for anyone who's studying Mishnah with me this morning, or anyone else for that matter. That's my theology. I am not, in Judaism, the rabbi is not a priest. So yeah, I like that, Steve, because it's also one master rabbi saying to his pupils, it is not in your hands, young rabbi in training, to do anything about this. Don't arrogate yourself to think that you can solve the greatest mystery of the human condition, which is why the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper. Excellent, Steve. Dad, I saw your digital hand and then it vanished.
No, it was a thumbs up.
Okay, good.
I agreed with what you said.
Excellent. Okay, so let's move on. Let's see what else Rabbi Yannai offers here. But this is an interesting, we studied, when we were breaking down Pirkei Avot chapters 1 and 2, we spent a lot of time on like the formal structure, the structural approach to Pirkei Avot. And this is, it's observable, we said, that many of the teachings in Pirkei Avot are kind of easy mnemonic, easy to remember 3-statement constructs. So we have a 3-statement construct here, but it's actually pretty, I would say, pretty loosely assembled. It's not a very, it doesn't hang together so well, at least not for me. If you want to find the missing links that I'm not seeing, please speak up. It's not even a continuation of the statement of Rabbi Yannai. So it's interesting that they bundle Yannai's comment, which is so immense in its depth and its wisdom and its open-endedness. Again, remember I said what was most astonishing about this Mishnah to me was what it does not say. The fact that God is not mentioned. I mean, it's really just, you learn a lot from the white space here. And then, but it's almost as if to create a 3-line mnemonic, they bundled it with 2 other statements, and I'm not seeing how they mesh, but again, maybe you will. Here we go. Rabbi Mattia ben Charash, this dude here. Who is he? Well, our commentary tells us that Mattia, or Cheresh, Charash is just a different way of vocalizing it. Cheresh, interestingly, by the way, means a person who is deaf. So it makes me wonder if Rabbi Mattia, which is just a diminutive form of Matityahu, or Matthew. So this is Rabbi Matt. Rabbi Mattia means God gave. Rabbi Mattia ben Cheresh, of the Tanaim, the original Mishnaic teachers of the 5th generation, the last generation of the original Mishnaic teachers, post Bar Kokhba revolt, as you can see from the dates, immediate post Bar Kokhba revolt. He fled the land of Israel due to the persecutions there after the Bar Kokhba revolt. He came to Rome where he established an academy. There he became wealthy and famous, but was nevertheless known for his great piety. Okay, thank you. A little bio on Mattia ben Charash. Omer, he says, Heve makdim bi shalom kol adam. Literally, here's how they translate it. Upon meeting people, be the first to extend greetings. That's an idiomatic translation. The literal translation, Heve, is just the imperative form of lihiot, which means to be. So be, makdim, from the root kuf dalet mem, kodem, which literally means early or prompt. And it comes from the cardinal direction east. Kedem is the east. So what's the root between early and east? Because that's the place where the sun rises, right? So be first, be like the sunrise. Get up early. Heve makdim, be early or prompt. Bishlom kol adam. With, be is just a preposition that means on or with or in. So be early in the shalom. Shalom, you know, is peace, but it also means the well-being. It can also mean just saying hi. Shalom. Heve makdim bishlom kol adam, every person. Again, I love Hebrew, and I love translating Hebrew, and I like translating Hebrew in a direct or non-idiomatic way. Because literally what is said here is, be prompt in the well-being of every person. Now, here's how the translator rendered it for us. Be the first to extend greetings. That is one possible interpretation, but it is not the only possible interpretation. Heve makdim bishlom kol adam. Be early in the well-being of every person. Interesting. And then we have another statement. This makes up the 3rd in the trilogy or in the mnemonic of 3. Veheve, and be zanav la'arayot, be a tail unto lions. Ve'al tihi, but do not be rosh lashualim, a head of foxes. Okay. Let's unpack these. Let's start with Rabbi Mattia's first statement. Be prompt in the well-being of other people, or as our translator renders one plausible, if not exclusively correct rendering. Be the first to extend greetings when you meet someone else. What do you think of Heve makdim bishlom kol adam? Be early in the shalom of every person. And then we'll get to foxes and lions. And if you're really feeling brave, and Michelle, thank you. You're back with a comment, and maybe if you want to circle back to where you were before, because I bypassed you in the. I gotta. My Torah has been deepened over sabbatical, but my Zoom aptitude has degraded. So, Michelle, do you want to go first, and then Audrey?
Well, in response to this one, I think when you do translate it, it suggests a very broad concept of taking responsibility and stepping up and being part of, being aware and helping other people and setting the stage and all. Be early. I think, welcoming people as they walk into shul for the first time because who you don't know is a very one example of a very practical implementation of that.
Thank you. Is
Of
everybody
that
listening?
very broader context. Now,
We are in person in shul. People keep asking me, is the bill? Yes, we're open. We're open for business. You can come. You may choose to wear your mask. You may choose to remove your mask. WRT is fully
I
open.
wasn't trying to create a promotion for showing up.
No, so well, people are, I've heard a lot of belly aching, like nothing's happening. Well, what are you talking about nothing's happening? And then they say, are you doing anything at the temple? I'm like, yes, I'm doing things at the temple. Come see me. It's where I work. I'm still Zooming from home. I like this format, I have to say. It also enables people who don't live locally to participate in our Mishnah class. There will be in-person and remote learning next calendar year, just so you know. That's how we're thinking about it, both. And we're investing in some technology to make the hybrid possibilities much more robust. So, Michelle, but thank you. There's a practical wisdom here. Like, if you're in shul, please don't wait for somebody to announce themselves and say, hi, I'm new here. This is like 8th grade cafeteria 101. You be the first to extend them. And this is, I have to say, this is one of the areas where I am more often than not vexed by how hard it is to get congregants to just go up and introduce themselves to somebody they've never met before. And I recognize that's going outside of your comfort zone. But my take here is that the rules of synagogue are not the same. Synagogue must be a place where we model a more perfect union.
So can I connect that back to the opening
Yes, I hope
statement?
you will. Please.
Thank you. Which is that which is the responsibility for, like, what is your responsibility for fixing the world? Did you get this world that was a problem, broken or inexplicable? And now here's one little thing you can do to try to address it.
It's beautiful. Thank you. I love that, and I'm so glad we're recording the class. So,
Now, I want to add one more thing for the
Please.
brief moment I'm grabbing the floor, and that is to the opening discussion about bollards and creating this mixed environment that's supposedly supposed to be welcoming,
Yeah.
but also off-putting. And that is a year or two ago, I wrote an article with a friend about a synagogue in Harrisonburg, West Virginia, and we created, Harrisonburg, Virginia, in the Shenandoah, and we recounted a series of stories of people just happening by their congregation and the incredible welcoming that this little tiny congregation was able to provide.
Right.
And making it look off-putting counters that.
Yeah, this is, I would say, one of the great spiritual dilemmas of 21st century Jewish life. The balance, last time I checked, the name of our shul is not Westchester Reformed Fortress. And yet sometimes I acknowledge openly it does feel that way. And if anyone feels discomfort around this, I want you to know it's the rabbi. And I also want to applaud all of our trustees and officers who I promise you, for all of these decisions about balancing security and welcome, they have been at the forefront of trying to wrestle with the dimensions of this dialogue and to exemplify the best values for the times. But yes, it's very complicated. And Michelle, I also want to acknowledge your relationship with the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, in Squirrel Hill.
Oh.
Right? Was that your home synagogue?
It
Or did
looks
I
like
lose
she
you?
stepped away.
Okay. Audrey Stoyer.
Well, I was just going to say that that passage sort of made me think of to put other people first, to put other people's welfare and comfort before your own, or step up immediately.
Yeah, and again, I like Michelle's connection that in some small way, that might be one powerful and meaningful response to the kind of bombshell that Rabbi Yannai drops in the first line of this Mishnah, which is that it is the nature of life that good people will suffer all out of proportion to their deeds, and bad people will prosper all out of proportion to their deeds. So what are you going to do about it? How about you go out there and say hi to someone? And I think that's a profoundly Jewish comment, by the way. It sounds almost like, really? That's your answer to the greatest question of the human condition? Why do the good suffer and the wicked prosper? Go out and meet someone? You know what? I kind of like it. And then there's a third statement here: foxes and lions, which is really interesting. Just putting it up on screen so we can all see it one more time. What does this mean? And be a tail unto lions, or for lions, be the tail of lions, plural, by the way, and don't be the head of foxes. So what's this all about? Okay, Dad, you're on. Lions and foxes.
Well, this is a challenging one, but let's acknowledge, first of all, that both lions and foxes are predators, which means that they have to go and seize and kill in order to survive. So there's an existential feeling about both of these. But lions, at least I think in Jewish symbology, symbolize courage. And you talk about the Lion of Judah becomes part of the seal of Israel. So there's a courageous, upstanding feature about the lions. They're associated with courage. Foxes, on the other hand, are associated with slyness or wiliness, or getting things by, can we say, deceit or by trickery. So I think it's an acknowledgement that how you go about getting things in this world matters.
I love your read on this. I really think you capture and you really hit the nail on the head. As I was contemplating this, I think that the image of foxes and lions is exactly that. Thank you for acknowledging they're both predators, but the way in which these two different animals, which can be, fearsome, comport themselves in the world, and the associations we have with these lions and foxes, particularly in Judaism, where both of these have kind of folkloric associations. The lion is in fact the seal of the tribe of Judah, which is the tribe that gives the Jewish people its name. We are the Judahites. We are the descendants of Judah, most specifically from among all the 12 tribes. There's a positive association with lions. There's a negative association with foxes. And so what they're saying is, if you're going to go with a crowd of people, better to be in the rear guard, better to be a follower of those who are noble and courageous than to be at the head of a band of folks who are wily, deceptive, and who, when they capture their prey, tuck it between their legs. It's very interesting. Lions proudly carry their prey in their mouths. So there's something really fascinating about this whole text. Now, it also turns out, and this is a personal comment, that foxes are Canidae, which means they are canines, and lions are felines. Now, I'm a rare thing in our neighborhood. I'm a cat owner, and so I have a certain favoritism for the cat family. And that was evidenced by my yoga this morning. And I was joined on the yoga mat by my buddy Rune. There she is, and she's saying "Namaste" right here. You just got in the way of my yoga, but anyway. So yeah, I'm a fan of the lions over the foxes. Does any? So I like that very much. Any other further comments on lions and foxes? And again, I'm not sure how all three of these statements gel, except that the first one, Yannai's bombshell, I'm calling it, seems to be about a general condition of humanity, and the other two are specific pieces of advice. And both pieces of advice, I'm just making observations about the text. I'm not sure I'm doing a good job of gelling them, but that's okay. I'm just telling you what I observe about these texts. Both statements are about how we interact with other people and how we live our lives in community, which is also interesting to me. And none of them references God. They're all about being a person in the world. Okay, our next Mishnah.
Jonathan,
Comment. Yep.
Jonathan, Joe's been trying to make a comment.
Great, Joe. Just unmute yourself, my friend.
First of all, Michelle, thank you very much. There was another hand up. I think it was Steve. Am I
Yeah, I
on?
see Steve as well. So
Uh-oh,
we'll
not
take
on.
those comments and then we'll look at the next Mishnah.
Oh, I slipped off the screen. Do you hear me?
I hear you just fine.
Okay. Now I can't see the screen. I was going to ask you to bring the paragraph up.
Oh,
But
I
to
can.
me-
I can do that easily.
But
One
I
moment.
don't have, something went wrong as on my screen. I don't know.
All
how to
right,
get-
here we are.
But I can't see it because.
Oh, you have
my
to
screen
click the
went off.
little zoom
Let me-
icon
let
at
me
the
get
bottom of your
back
screen.
on.
to come out. Yeah.
I'm zooming back on, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll be on in 2 seconds. I'm on.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
To me, it made perfect sense, especially with the last line. I think it tied everything up. I'd like to ask your father a question.
Okay,
If it wasn't lion and foxes, if it merely said, I'd rather be the tail of the lion rather than the head of the lion, would it still make the same sense? Because to me, it did. I was just thinking of tail and head. Head meaning in front of, and tail meaning in back of. It's like saying, I'm saying hello to you first, rather than for waiting for the tail end of the conversation and saying it second.
Oh, that's an interesting connection, which I did not observe here.
Okay, upon meeting people, be the first to extend greetings. Sometimes what brought to mind to me is, and this is always a question I have, is you see somebody quickly and you see them, you want to acknowledge them, you say, how are you? But before you wait for an answer, you go on to the next thing. And if you say, how are you really willing to listen to them? And I think the rest of the paragraph brings that compassion in with the person you're saying hello to and interacting with. So I think to me, it brings it all together, that you put the other person first, as I think Audrey said, and that you just welcome them into your little area, your little interaction, and saying, you're just as important as I am. I'm willing to listen to you. You're still part of what we're doing together.
That's nice, Joe. I don't think it warrants a follow-up from either me or my dad. It's a nice comment. Steve.
Yeah, so I was just thinking that that paragraph of Mishnah with the lion and the fox, or the head of the fox, the head of the fox and the tail of the lion is a parallel to to Yannai's statement about the wicked and the righteous, and somehow equating what is and what isn't, what should be. Just because the two things and the two things just felt like
even if you have to be in last place in life, better to be noble and honorable than to be first among the deceitful and wicked. I love that. I love that, Steve. That's a really nice, what we call an inclusio, or an envelope back to the beginning. Okay, Rabbi Jacob, Let me remind you, Westchester Reformed Temple, this is not Rabbi Rick Jacobs. This is a guy whose first name was Jacob. This is Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov ben Korshai, a little bio on him. Same generation as Rabbi Mattia ben Cheresh above him. He was a confidant and teacher of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, the second, and his son Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who is the greatest rabbi of the Mishnaic period, the one who actually is takes it upon himself to compile the Mishnah. Whether I'm sure he had help, but he is credited with being the organizer and the redactor of the Mishnah itself. Dad, comment.
Just to go back to the previous Rabbi Mattia.
Yeah.
How is it that after the Bar Kokhba revolt, he moved to Rome and established an academy?
Yeah, isn't that wild? But that is in fact true. After the Bar Kokhba revolt, the Romans, the Romans had sacked and burned Jerusalem in the year 70. But Jews were actually still residing in and around Jerusalem even after the fall of Judea and the failure of the first Judean rebellion. In the year 74, we know that the last stand was at Masada, right? So if you just want to familiarize yourself with that conflict, if you have any familiarity with the location of the story of Masada, that's the end of that war. But the Jewish people, we did what we did, and we moved on, and we kept going. And in some ways, by the way, the fact that Rabbi Yannai is talking about suffering of the righteous and prosperity of the wicked, against the backdrop of what happened to the Jewish people between the years of 70 and 135, when in the early 130s we rebelled again. We were led by this quasi-messianic figure, Shimon Bar Koziba, who was renamed Bar Kokhba, son of a star, a messianic image if ever there were one, knowing what we know about the circumstances, the purported circumstances of Jesus' own birth. Stars in the sky indicate that the person being born is special and has salvation for the people in mind, whatever. So then the Jewish people rise up again, and they also fail. And this time the Romans were much more punitive. And they renamed Jerusalem Aelia Capitolina, and they restricted Jews from even coming into the city. But at that point, actually, is generally when historians mark the full diaspora of the Jewish people. And this is when the majority of Jewish people after 135 no longer reside in Eretz Yisrael. The majority have gone. And where did they go? Well, they go all over. A whole new civilization will be established between the Tigris and the Euphrates in Mesopotamia. Well, it's no longer Mesopotamia, it's Babylonia. So you have an entire Babylonian Jewish civilization, present-day Iraq, one of the greatest Jewish civilizations in all of Jewish history, will grow after the Bar Kokhba revolt. You have Jews who will move back to Egypt. I know that sounds bizarre too, but there's a thriving Jewish population in Alexandria, and the world's greatest Jewish library resources were stored up in Alexandria. The Cairo Geniza in Cairo. I mean, there's all sorts of Jewish life. But the migration of Jews that you and I are probably most familiar with, and which most of us owe our existence to, is the one that took Jews throughout the Greco-Roman world and from there on into Central and Western Europe. And so you have a significant Jewish population that developed in and around Rome, of all places. Why exactly, I don't know, but it seems as if the capital city of the Roman Empire was actually more hospitable to Jews at this time than the renamed territory of Eretz Yisrael, which the Romans now refer to as Palestina. And the Romans put in extra salt into that wound by renaming our land after the greatest enemy of the Jewish people in biblical history, the Philistines. So they renamed the territory after the Philistines as a further blow to the wounded morale of the Jewish people. They rename it Palestine. They rename it Palestina. But Jews in and around Rome actually, post Bar Kokhba, consider themselves the longest extant Jewish community in the world. If you've ever davened at the synagogue in Rome, that is not that Jewish community and that synagogue long predates the Iberian exile, or better known as the aftermath of the Spanish Inquisition. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, but also Ferdinand and Isabella kicked out all the Jews. Right? That's what you should remember about the year 1492. There's even, by the way, some conjecture. I don't know if it's robust scholarship, but there's some conjecture that Columbus was secreting crypto Jews aboard the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Maybe, probably, but I'm not sure that was the agenda. Anyway, so you have Jews in and around Rome from post Bar Kokhba on. And they consider themselves the world's oldest extant Jewish community. So if you go to the synagogue in Rome, which has, if you think WRT has a tight security apparatus, think again. The Roman synagogue, it's crazy. I mean, you're going to be frisked, you're going to be checked, you're going to be asked who you are before you'll be let in for shot. They've had other terrorist attacks on that synagogue compound. So I've davened there. They use a whole different prayer book. It's not Ashkenazic. It's not Sephardic. It's Minhag Roma. It's the custom of the Roman Jewish community. And they do like 6 Shemas in the service. I could not follow the service. Not because I don't know the Hebrew, just I could not follow the flow of the service. Plus, they're davening in Italian accents, so, you know. Anyway.
Well, you can revisit them by going to Latanzi on Restaurant
That's right,
Row.
Roman Jewish restaurant in the Theater District on 46th on Restaurant Row. Latanzi, they, in fact, this week, they do a Pesach meal. They have roasted lamb at Latanzi, and they have their own garlic and olive oil house-made matzot, which are outstanding for matzah. It's like, they are the head of foxes in the matzah world, right? Okay, if you get, thank you.
Where can you get that matzah outside of the restaurant?
Not sure. I was joking with Rabbi Levy. His message to the congregation in the weekly e-blast is all about the debate between 7 days or 8 days for Pesach. And Rabbi Levy proudly confesses to being an 8-day observer of Pesach, as does Alan Markowitz. And you know what I call you all? Matzachists. That's maybe the only original idea I've ever had, by the way. That one I want credit for. Like, in my eulogy, somebody invented the term matzahist for somebody who observes 8 days of Pesach but still affiliates at a Reform shul. Okay, we move on. All right, the next text, finally. Rabbi Jacob, yeah, you know who. Okay. This Rabbi Jacob. True story before we read this text. I had a member of the congregation who sometimes studies with us, Cynthia Samwick. When her father was dying this fall, she said, "Is it true what they say?" And then she quoted this Mishnah. Clearly someone had quoted this to her. I know she studies with an Orthodox Rebbitzin, and that's probably where she heard this. Let's read it. Rabbi Yaakov Omer, Rabbi Jacob says, Ha'olam hazeh. All right, you're good enough at Hebrew at this point. You know ha'olam hazeh means this world. Domeh lefrozdor. Lifrozdor. Oh, thank you. Yes, to a prosdor. So this world is like a prosdor or a frozdor. That's clearly a Greek loanword that they translate here as a vestibule. The reason I couldn't pronounce it, by the way, is because it's not Hebrew. It's a Greek word written with Hebrew characters. So, lifrozdor bifnei ha'olam haba, literally before or in front of the world to come. This world is like a vestibule or a lobby before the world to come. And now the imperative part. Hatkein atzmecha b'prosdor. Prepare yourself in the prosdor, in the lobby, in the vestibule, the waiting room. Kedei shetikanes latraklin. In order that you may enter the banquet hall, another Greek loanword. So prepare yourself in the pros door so that you can enter the traklin, which is a word for the great banquet hall. Okay. What do you make of this metaphor? What does it mean? Do you accept it? If so, why? If not, why not? This world is like a vestibule for the world to come. Prepare yourself in the vestibule so that you may enter the banqueting hall. Audrey. Oh, just unmute yourself, please.
Isn't this sort of un-Jewish? I thought that we didn't believe in a world to come.
Yeah, so that is a response I was hoping would be shared, and it's good that it's being shared right up front. In the latter half of the 19th century, immersed as they were in what is known in Hebrew as the Haskalah, in German as the Aufklärung, and in English as the Enlightenment, which was a radical shifting and upheaval in geopolitics in Europe, in Western Europe, in philosophy, and in all manner of arts and letters. The French Revolution, the American Revolution are all outgrowths or byproducts of this dramatic period of shift in thought and political formation, moving away from feudalism and monarchy to for the people, by the people, of the people, even though that's Lincoln's phrasing from several generations later. That all men are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We don't have that kind of idea without the Enlightenment. So Judaism, too, is both affected by and responsive to these larger social, political, and artistic literary forces, cultural forces. One such dimension of this is an increasing, at least in reform circles, and of course the rise of reform is directly responsive to the Enlightenment. So these forces begin to shape Western Europe in the latter decades of the 18th century. The first Reform temple is dedicated in 1810 with the designation Reform. The first society that uses the term Reform to describe their Jewish project in Seesen, Germany, central Germany, adopts that language in like 1801. So the first decade of the 19th century is where we first encounter this impulse to reform Judaism. So please correct the person who uses it in the past tense or the adjectival form that you are a reformed Jew. No, you are a reformed Jew. You are a Jew who participates willingly and actively in the ongoing project of reform. That's a digression. All of this shapes a certain sect or denomination or movement within Judaism, a stream within Judaism, that believes that the highest form of religious awareness or religious thought is a united, they would have said, brotherhood of mankind in the pure awareness of the truth of the one God that can be arrived at through one's rational capacity, right? A pure religion of reason. Among the byproducts or side effects of the wholesale adoption of that way of thinking within reform is also the rejection of certain Jewish thoughts, beliefs, prayers, and customs that did not, in the view of these rabbis, coming out of Germany, but really finding their transplanted soil in America to be the most fertile for the growth of this kind of Judaism. Europe has way too much baggage for reform to thrive there. You know, most of European countries were religious autocracies, freedom of religion, separation of church and state are not native ideas in almost every European country, whereas they are, as it were, baked into the DNA of America. They are part of the founding project of America. I hate the word founding fathers because it really erases all the mothers, but okay. The founding fathers were products of the Enlightenment, so were the original Reform rabbis. Part of this expression of reform, the 1850s on into the first decades of the 20th century, what we sometimes refer to as classical reform, was to expunge from Judaism all things that struck these rabbis as ancient relics of superstition, Jewish beliefs and practices, prayers, norms, customs, ways of being that were, in their view, out of step with what they would have called modern life. Okay, so the same forces that are driving these Jews to say, cut your payas, eat bacon, put an organ in your synagogue, get a synagogue choir, have the rabbi speak in the vernacular, don't dress like you're in 17th century Poland, for goodness sake. All of these same forces are also leading these rabbis to say, and a whole bunch of ideas that are in our prayer book are no longer relevant to what they would have called a modern priestly state of holiness. It's fascinating. They were hung up on like priestly holiness, but customs and dress and diet were really distasteful to them. And among the targets that they really took up with special vigor for censorship, for really extirpating, expunging from the record, were references to the Messiah or a personal Messiah. Messianism, a messianic age, a day in which the world will be redeemed, all made the cut. Those are actually embraced by Reform, early Reform, classical Reform, but the idea of a personal Messiah, a person who comes back to redeem the world, no, smacks too much of Christianity, and it's superstition, and it's illogical, it's irrational. Get rid of it. The idea that good people will go to heaven, or the Garden of Eden, they would say Gan Eden, and bad people will go to hell. We have a Jewish hell, it's called Gehenna. It's named for Ge Ben Hinnom, the Ben Hinnom Valley, which is just to the western-facing slope of Jerusalem, in front of the walls of the old city, facing the Damascus Gate. Is it the Damascus Gate? It's been too long since I've been in Israel. It's been 3 years. I got to go back. Where the Sultan's pool is. Apparently, according to the prophet Jeremiah, in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible, child sacrifice to the Canaanite fire deity Molech was carried out in this valley. And so this valley that became associated with this awful wickedness of burning children alive became the word that Jews used for hell. But originally it was hell on earth. Ge Ben Hinnom becomes compressed to Ge Hinnom, which means the valley of Hinnom, which is Gehenna. Just Gehenna, which you've heard, surely, is just Jewish hell. And eventually, these concepts become spiritualized, so that it's no longer a valley in Jerusalem, it's the netherworld, where you'll be sentenced to fiery torment. Jews have these ideas. Afterlife is all over Judaism. I've taught whole courses in it. Actually, about 2.5 years ago, I taught a whole course on death and what happens after we die in Jewish thought. But we, as products of Reform Judaism, and even if you're not Reform, if you're not Orthodox and you're in America, you have been deeply influenced by that period of reformation of the tradition, where references to heaven and hell were removed from Judaism, taken out of the prayer book. The third, by the way, great censorship project of these rabbis was to remove references to returning to the land of Zion from the prayer book. These rabbis were explicitly anti-Zionist, but I want to make it clear that they started that before Zionism as a political reality was really a thing. They continued it for a while because they're living in America, and they're not subjected to the forces that lead, for instance, to the horror of the Dreyfus case, or to an increase in pogroms, state-sponsored violence against Jewish people and Jewish communities, or the systematic marginalization of Jews from German society 70 years before the Holocaust, having Jews removed from university teaching positions and what have you. So I'm saying that Zionism becomes a political necessity because of anti-Semitism that is state-sponsored and state-promoted in Europe. American Reform Judaism believes that there's no need to go to the Promised Land because we're in the Promised Land, right? My seminary, Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, which has just announced that it will no longer ordain rabbis there, a very consequential development. In the chapel of the sanctuary, in the chapel on campus, they call it a chapel, another product of this period of reform in America. There's a stained glass panel that shows the tablets of the law with an American flag plopped right on top of them. And the tablets of the law are actually obscured by the American flag. Like, it's not the American flag as a backdrop and in front of it is the tablets of the law. No, it's tablets of the law, and like blocking 70% of the text on the tablets is a big American flag. I'll try and find that image because that's everything. That's everything you need to know about how these Jews thought of who they were, where they were. It's a very long answer to Audrey's question, but it's also one of my favorite areas of study and teaching, is for people to understand what reform is really all about or was really all about. And by the way, the only thing I can tell you is it's still changing. So you have to be very careful when you say, but don't Reform Jews believe, or don't Jews believe X? Because you have to say, well, which Jews, when and where believed X? And by the way, at any time and in most places, Judaism has been a multivocal tradition. Alan Markowitz.
Well, you touched upon my interpretation of the writing that we just had up on the screen.
I'll put it back up.
Where we're preparing in the vestibule for the world to come. Well, the concept of the world to come is an idyllic imagery. And the current world is not. But if you're in the vestibule preparing for the world to come, by default, you're creating the world to come where you are today.
Fantastic, Alan, and thank you. There is, I believe, a deliberateness to the placement of this teaching right beneath what we've been learning this morning, right? We begin with Rabbi Yannai's bombshell, this stark acknowledgement about here's the way the world works. He means the world of the temporal world, this world, the world of the here and now, or beautifully expressed by the two Hebrew words, ha'olam hazeh, this world, the world you can point to, feel, interact with, have a nice dinner out in, get thrown in jail in, that world. This seems to be part of an attempt by at least one rabbi, Rabbi Jacob singular, to reconcile the dilemma of theodicy, right? The existence of ha'olam hazeh, this world with all of its pain and all of its bewildering features like bad people who prosper, good people who suffer, to reconcile this world with the existence of a God who is just and good. His answer, it is not the only answer, it is not even the definitive Jewish answer, it is a Jewish answer. His answer is that, wait a minute, there is another reality. There is a world beyond this world. And again, the language of olam haba, in contrast to olam hazeh, the world of the here and now, I like the words olam hazeh translate as the here and now, the world of the here and now, because of what haba means, what olam means. Olam means world, but it doesn't just mean the physical cosmos. It doesn't just mean planet Earth. Olam actually means time. Olam means the all-encompassing present. When you want to say forever and ever in Hebrew, how do you say it? You say it in prayer all the time. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto.
Leolam va'ed.
Leolam Va'ed, right? And I saw some of you mouthing it, right? Even without unmuting. Right. Leolam Va'ed is the rabbinic way of saying forever and ever. Look at the words. Leolam means, it doesn't have to do with a physical world. Leolam Va'ed means from now to infinity. From now to forever. Leolam Va'ed. It's a really cool phrase, by the way. Olam will later also mean the physical totality or reality of the cosmos. So in Einsteinian terms, Albert Einstein, it's space-time, right? Einstein was the mind that first understood and communicated mathematically that space and time are actually two sides of the same coin, that they are linked. And this has to do with his theory of relativity and what happens with the fixed speed of light. It's very cool, by the way, that time is actually not fixed. And the faster you're moving, the slower time itself is. So Einstein refers to one word, space-time, or the space-time continuum, because the physicality of space and the perception of the unfolding of time are actually two sides of the exact same coin in physics. That's my really best attempt to explain something impossible to explain in layman's terms. And I've tried reading A Brief History of Everything by Stephen Hawking, way beyond me. So, okay, he gets into all of this. So, Leolam Va'ed, right? So, I want to emphasize, though, that what Einstein understood to be true in physics is also part of how the rabbis understand the world, at least this rabbi does, and is directly consonant with the terminology he's using. So it's not just that, it's not even so much that, okay, there's this world of, frogs and haircuts and trees and eating matzah, and then there's another physical world in which we're disembodied spirits floating around. That's not the essence of what he's saying. The essence is actually more the temporal dimension. There's the olam hazeh, the here and now, and the olam haba, which I translate as the hereafter. There's a kind of existence that we enjoy in this world, or perhaps don't enjoy if Rabbi Yannai is correct, which of course he is. And then there's going to be another phase of our existence, one after the other in time.
Right.
Is it okay? But just so you understand that he's not directly saying you're in this world and then you go to heaven or hell. He's saying you exist in this form, in this reality, and you continue to exist, but in a transformed way. I happen to like that a lot because I think that it is true in a few different ways. One, at the physical level, I hope to become a tree. I think that would actually be an evolution. If I could be transformed, then you can even do that now. You can have your ashes turned into a tree. It's very cool. Or it's okay if I become part of the water table and the soil, and birds get nourished by the carbon that's in me now. It's all good. But at the spiritual level, even more, right? I'm just going to speak personally. My grandfather has been dead for 33 years, something like that. I was 15, 14 when he died. I still have a relationship with him, though. Like, he's still a reality in my life. Just differently. Audrey, I know you talk to your parents all the time. And I've buried both of them. And in some ways, they continue to shape us. My mom said not too long ago, she's not able to join us this morning, but my mom said, I'm not really worried about disappearing from your life after I'm gone, because I know that I'm going to be nagging you forever. Uh, and like almost everything my mom has ever said to me, it is manifestly true. So I don't know. I kind of believe in this olam hazeh, olam haba business, just not in the physicalized way that they are often depicted. Okay, tons of hands up. I'm going to stop talking and let the rest of you take the dialogue, and then we'll end our session. And we'll return to this theme next week, because there's going to be more on this olam hazeh, olam haba, which seems to be one prominent, this is the takeaway, one prominent rabbinic strain of reconciling the dilemma that Rabbi Yannai gives us, which is, of course, theodicy. Why the wicked prosper and why the righteous suffer. One possible way of reconciling this is that the justice you seek in the olam hazeh, which is unattainable, you want good people to be rewarded in this world. You want the bad people to be punished in this world. Human instruments of justice can produce some outcomes, but not good enough. Not good enough, right? We're sending far too many innocent people to life sentences in prison or worse. And we are not nearly incarcerating enough of the actual bad guys. Just human justice is such a blunt and imperfect instrument of justice. Only divine justice, which is of course just a concept, only divine justice is perfect. I believe that we have this concept of divine justice. It's a human concept, but it's our North Star, right? It's what we aspire for human justice to emulate, but we can't, because we're people. One possible answer to that is olam hazeh, olam haba. Yes, this world, messy, complicated, bewildering, really foobar, fouled up beyond all recognition. Olam haba, that's where you'll get what you deserve. Okay, gosh, I'll go down the comments in the order I see them. Michelle Braun, you're first.
So in the course of my continuing education, I ended up with a classmate, pen pal, who is about 40 years younger than me and is Chinese, calling in from China. And she is, I think, evangelical Christian convert. And she recently sent me an email about the Messiah, and it was in the context of coming up to Easter and Passover and the Messiah, and don't Jews believe in the Messiah? And so I was trying very hard, restricted to only email, trying to handle this sensitively, but accurately. And I did say that there is a concept of a messianic rebirth, but it is an end of days approach, not somebody idea concept, not somebody came,
right,
succeeded and or failed because the world still is in bad shape, and then you gotta. And we're still not there, but in fact, we're still moving towards there. And
that's the thing that we should emphasize. It's the moving towards, right?
Well, then I want to add, hold on, you've been talking. My turn.
No, go.
I've
had 3 months of not talking to you. I can't help myself.
out of sync with the Mishnah text where we are now, I did introduce, the Lurianic idea of the broken world and the need to repair it, which of course Reform and Reconstructing, who are also trying to bring things forward, Judaism have reinterpreted in very much embraced in our modern concept in order to do that. But there's very clear difference to me, but there is also this, and I mean, I decided I don't care. All I have is my responsibility now to try to improve things, but to try to make that distinction. I think because, as you indicated, our language is very much influenced by where we are now and the Christian concepts of that.
Thank you, and I apologize for the interruption. How did your pen pal like your response?
Well, she said, yeah, that's the tikkun olam thing. I've heard about that.
Great.
And we'll talk more. I've actually, at some point, I'll have a Zoom with her little Bible study group, but we haven't set that up yet. And I'm not sure how we'll go forward with that.
But first of all, you've acknowledged the difficulty of responding to anyone who says, "What do Jews believe?" or who asks, "Don't Jews believe this?" or "Don't Jews not believe this?" Again, as I said earlier today, you have to qualify which Jews, when, and where. Beyond that, though, I think you did an excellent job of finding some common ground among, if not all, then most Jews, most places, most times in history. Whether or not we actually adopt the language of Mashiach, of a Messiah, which many Jews have and continue to do, or we simply talk about Yemot HaMashiach, which means the Messianic age, which many Jews do and have, or we don't even talk in the language of Messiah at all, but we talk about Tikkun HaOlam, the shared concept, which I would view as integral to Judaism, not incidental, but integral. All Judaisms at all times and places affirm that the world as it is not the way it ought to be, A, and B, that the work of the Jew individually and of the Jews collectively is tikkun ha'olam, to engage in the transformation of the world from the way it is to the way it ought to be. In that sense, all Judaisms are messianic in that you say we're getting there, right? They are progressive in the sense of we do not preach a religion of you must accept things the way they are, which, by the way, is a little bit Buddhist. It's more Eastern spirituality to accept and be aware of and then transcend the way things are, but in your spirit. But you're not going to change the way things are as Buddhist. Judaism says, yeah, the world's messed up, now go fix it.
Right.
Okay, so thank you. Dad, Audrey, Joe, and then I'm going to conclude.
I'll try to keep this as brief as I can, but I think we've touched on the deepest possible questions today. And I think, to the response that you put forward, once you recognize that bad things happen to good people, et cetera, and so what? And what do you do? And I think the essence of the teachings from this morning is that, well, what you do matters. How you act matters. In a world, and I think, this goes to my kind of cosmic view of things, the cosmos is arrayed with chaos and order. And I've always felt that, if there's a function of Judaism or if there's a postulate of Judaism, it's that order matters, that's where you find the divine, and how you act matters, and how you prepare yourself, and what your legacy will be, and how you treat people. You can do anything you want. You can say, well, none of this matters because it's all chaos. I might as well do what I want. But Judaism is exactly the opposite. It posits what you do, how you act matters very deeply. That's the divine mission.
Beautiful, beautiful. Remember the first image of God in the Torah. Let there be light. The world was wild and chaotic, and God said, let there be light. To be a Jew is to emulate the divine in Genesis chapter 1. Right? Now you be a light unto the nations. Beautiful. Audrey and then Joe.
I just wanted to say that it's like your friend Dara Horn, The World to Come, which I found horrible at the end, but
One of her novels. She's celebrated for her most recent collection of essays called People Love Dead Jews. It was one of my sabbatical reads. You must read it. You'll read it in 2 afternoons, by the way. So go pick up Dara Horn, People Love Dead Jews, and then you can work her way back through her other works, which are powerful. Audrey, go on.
Well, I loved On All Other Nights, I think it was called, the one about Passover. And then there was another one on the South, or that may be the same. I listened at the Stryker Center. She was interviewed along with her sister about Everybody Loves Dead Jews.
Yep.
And it was an interesting concept.
Yeah, go back and read, because she really lifts up the world to come as a Jewish concept in one of her previous novels. Thank you.
Right.
Joe.
Let me unmute.
Yep, you're unmuted.
Oh, I'm on, okay. First of all, in these Zoom conferences, every time I'm thinking of something, somebody else comes up with something that I think of another thing for. But I must compliment your dad for saying what I was thinking, and also compliment him on doing the right thing and preparing. And it's obvious where your character and where your intelligence comes from.
Well,
but
my mom gets at least 50% credit, but thank
absolutely,
you.
absolutely.
I'm putting it at 90-20. I'm putting
Okay.
it at 90-20, John.
90-20, that means I'm 100% great. Okay.
But I was thinking of something else. That last paragraph, you don't have to bring it up because it reminded me of something my parents taught me back in the 40s, or when I was a young child. And it pretty much says the same thing. But when I read that, I didn't take it as something of a new world or going into a world, or I did reference it in terms of what you said about being a time thing. It could be from now till tomorrow or the next thing we do. And I remember that brought to mind what my parents taught me when I was a little child. And by the way, talking about parents and being affected by them, my mother died in 1960 and my father died in 1965, and they are still with me today.
Yeah.
And they taught me in those days, they gave me an expression: the way you make your bed, that's the way you'll sleep.
It's great.
And
It's
that
great.
brings to mind what that last expression was. Prepare.
great.
Now, to me, the vestibule was the now and the today, and the preparation place and the school that you go and the education that you have. And the banquet hall is getting a place where you get the fruits of what you prepared for.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for bringing a little bit more concreteness to these concepts. I also want to lift up not just what Michelle said, but what she added as a kind of postscript in the chat window, which is that we enact something very Jewish toward the end of Seder when we welcome Elijah, right? Elijah is the folkloric Jewish figure associated with the coming of Messiah or the coming of the Messianic age. It's almost as if, and this is Michelle's insight, we're like trying to force Messiah to come, right? It's not just like he'll show up in his own good time. This is proactive Messiah bringing. That's distinctly and deeply Jewish. On that note, enjoy the rest of your Pesach. I hope that it is sweet and fulfilling. And if all of you matzahkists who are observing until Saturday night, sei gesinnt. Those of you who, like me, will be breaking tomorrow night, sei gesinnt. We have a wonderful service tomorrow night at Temple, both in person and online. I hope many of you will choose to join us. Martin Block, who is a survivor of the Shoah, will tell his story. We will be together with our 6th grade community for this service of responsibility, and it is also a weekend where they will begin to explore on their way to their B'nai Mitzvah journeys. And I'm really looking forward to praying with you and celebrating the end of Pesach. Chag Sameach. Take care, everyone.
Kol hakavod, Rabbi.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yashikar.
Thank you. Bye-bye.